morning sun spilled across the wide Texas plains, lighting up the lonely ranch that sat miles from the nearest town. The faint whistle of wind rolled through the tall grass, carrying the scent of hay, earth, and something timeless: solitude. Daniel Harper leaned against the wooden fence, his hat pulled low, his eyes fixed on the horizon. For 15 years, he had worked this ranch alone after his wife's passing, raising his daughter Emily the best he could. The land had grown older with him, the fences weathered, the barns creaking, but the silence had remained his closest companion. He didn't mind it. Not until that morning. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, breaking the quiet routine of his day. A car, sleek, silver, and completely out of place on this dirt road, rolled toward the gate. Daniel straightened, squinting against the sun as it stopped. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in a simple blue dress, her hair tied back but wind-tossed from the drive. She looked around as though she'd stepped into another world. "Mr. Harper?" she called, her voice steady yet soft. "That's me," Daniel replied, pushing his hat back. "Can I help you, ma'am?" She smiled, polite, uncertain. "I'm Clara Bennett. I teach at Hillcrest Elementary. I'm your daughter's teacher." The name struck him. Emily had mentioned a Miss Bennett several times, always with excitement, always with admiration, but he hadn't expected this. A woman who looked barely older than he was when he first started the ranch. Her eyes carried warmth, but something in them also mirrored his, a quiet loneliness, hidden beneath purpose. "I see," Daniel said, crossing his arms. "Is Emily all right?" "She's fine," Clara assured him quickly. "Actually, she's doing better than fine. She's one of my brightest students. But I wanted to talk about something a bit more personal." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Teachers didn't usually drive all this way just to talk. He gestured toward the porch. "Well, ma'am, if it's about Emily, you're welcome to come in." Inside, the house was simple, clean but lived in. Wooden floors, faded photographs, and the faint scent of coffee and saddle soap filled the space. Clara sat down, glancing at the old photo of Daniel's wife on the mantel. "I didn't mean to intrude," Clara began carefully, "but Emily mentioned that you've been alone for a while." Daniel looked at her, half amused, half confused. "She talk about me that much, huh?" "Only good things," Clara said with a small laugh. "But when we were preparing for the school's family day event, she told me she didn't have anyone to bring. She said you never leave the ranch. And that made me wonder." Daniel tilted his head. "Wonder what?" Clara's hands fidgeted in her lap. "If maybe you'd like to come. With her, as her guest. It's not just for kids. We're encouraging parents to join in the activities." He rubbed his chin. "I appreciate that, Miss Bennett, but I'm not much for crowds." She smiled softly, almost knowingly. "Emily really wants you there. She just doesn't say it because she thinks you'll feel uncomfortable." The room went quiet. Daniel's throat tightened a little. He hadn't realized how much his distance might have affected his daughter. Clara stood. "Anyway, I should go." "I just thought I'd try asking in person." But before she could turn, Daniel said something he didn't plan to. "Miss Bennett." "Clara, wait." She looked back, curious. "Let's make a deal," he said slowly, unsure where the words were coming from. "If I come to that event, you'll have to do something for me in return." Clara's brow furrowed, a flicker of humor in her eyes. "And what would that be?" He hesitated for a moment, then smiled, a rare, gentle smile that hadn't surfaced in years. "Be my date, for one day. Just one." The silence stretched between them, the sound of the wind outside filling the space. Clara blinked, caught completely off guard. "Your date?" He chuckled lightly, embarrassed by his own boldness. "I mean, not in a serious way. I just meant, I don't go to these things much. I wouldn't know a soul there. If you're there, maybe I won't make a fool of myself." Her surprise softened into amusement. "You could have just said you needed a partner." "Maybe," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting. "But it's been a long time since anyone's called me a date." Felt nice for a second. Clara shook her head, laughing quietly. "All right, Mr. Harper. I'll be your date for one day. But only if you promise to show up and not disappear halfway through." "Deal." As she left, Daniel found himself standing by the porch long after her car disappeared, into the road's shimmer. Something in the air felt lighter. For the first time in a long while, the ranch didn't seem so empty. Later that evening, Emily came running out of the barn, her braids swinging. "Daddy, Miss Bennett came here today?" He tried to act casual. "Yeah, she stopped by. Told me about some school thing." Emily's eyes brightened. "Are you coming?" Daniel looked at her. The way her smile mirrored her mother's, wide and full of life. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said softly. "I think I am." That night, as the stars scattered across the wide sky, Daniel sat on the porch with a quiet heart. He thought of Clara's smile, of how the sunlight had caught the edge of her hair, and of how easily she'd walked into his lonely world like she belonged there. He didn't know what the event would bring. He didn't know that Clara had her own reasons for visiting, reasons tied to her past, her loneliness, and something she'd lost long before becoming a teacher. But one thing was certain: for the first time in years, Daniel Harper looked forward to tomorrow. And somewhere, a voice whispered in the wind, "Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly." In the shape of a teacher's smile, the morning of the family day arrived, with the crisp scent of sunlight and hay drifting through the air. Daniel Harper stood in front of his old mirror, buttoning up a clean white shirt that hadn't seen daylight in years. He chuckled quietly at his reflection. He looked the same man who worked the fields every day, but his eyes had a glimmer of something different. Hope, maybe. Nervousness, certainly. "Daddy, hurry up!" Emily called from outside. "We'll be late." He grabbed his hat, gave himself one last look, and smiled. All right, I'm coming." The truck rattled along the dusty road toward Hillcrest Elementary. It was a small school with laughter spilling out of every window. As they parked, Daniel felt strangely out of place among the colorful balloons, music, and families filling the yard. He adjusted his hat, suddenly aware of how unfamiliar the world outside his ranch had become. Emily ran ahead to join her classmates, leaving him by the gate. He stood there awkwardly until a familiar voice broke through the noise. "You actually came," Clara said, walking up with that same warm smile that had been stuck in his head all week. "Wouldn't miss it," Daniel said, tipping his hat slightly. "Had to keep my promise to my date." She laughed. "Good answer, Mr. Harper, though you might want to relax a little. You look like you're about to face a firing squad." He looked around at the crowd and sighed. "Feels that way." They spent the next hour walking through the event, Emily tugging Daniel from one game booth to another, her laughter echoing like music every time she smiled. Clara noticed the change in Daniel's eyes. Pride mixed with guilt. Love mingled with distance. She could see he was a man who carried his loneliness quietly, like a scar he refused to show. At one point, the three of them sat under a big oak tree near the playground. Clara handed Daniel a cup of lemonade, watching as Emily joined the other kids nearby. "She really adores you," Clara said softly. Daniel nodded, eyes following his daughter. "She's my world. I just never learned how to give her more than work and shelter. Her mom used to be the heart of everything. After she passed, I guess I forgot how to live outside this ranch." Clara looked down at her drink. "I understand that more than you think." He turned to her, curiosity rising. "You've been alone a while too?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I was married once, young and foolishly sure I had forever. But it didn't last. He left when life got hard. Since then, teaching's been the only thing that's kept me going. Kids are easier to understand than adults sometimes." Daniel's gaze softened. "Sounds like you've been through your share of storms." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I could see yours." Their eyes met for a long, unguarded moment. The air between them shifted, not with romance, but with recognition, two souls that had been walking through silence, finally hearing someone else's footsteps beside them. Then, the principal's voice echoed from the stage, calling all parents and children for the family dance. Emily ran over, eyes shining. "Daddy, come dance with me." Daniel froze. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think..." Clara stood, brushing her skirt. "Go on, Daniel. She's been waiting all day." With a deep breath, he took Emily's hand. The crowd clapped as the music began, and an old country tune drifting through the speakers. Daniel moved clumsily at first, stepping on her shoes, making her giggle. But soon, laughter replaced awkwardness, and for a brief, beautiful moment, the years of distance melted away. Clara stood watching, her heart tightening in her chest. Something about the scene felt so familiar, so achingly tender. She felt a tear slide down her cheek before she realized it. When the song ended, Daniel and Emily walked over, breathless and laughing. "You see that?" he said proudly. "Didn't even fall once." "You were perfect," Emily beamed. Later, as the sun began to dip, the crowd thinned. Daniel found Clara sitting on a bench by the school garden, watching the sky turn soft shades of gold. He sat beside her quietly, I haven't danced since my wedding, he said with a small laugh. Guess I didn't forget completely. Clara turned to him, her expression thoughtful. You're a good father, Daniel. You just forgot to let yourself be happy. He nodded slowly. Maybe I just needed someone to remind me. For a while they sat in silence, the kind that feels safe, like the world outside had paused to listen. Then Clara spoke again, her voice gentle but trembling. There's something I should tell you. Daniel frowned. What is it? Clara looked toward the playground where Emily was packing her art supplies. When I first started teaching, I didn't know who Emily was. I only saw a bright little girl with her mother's eyes. But then when she mentioned her last name, Harper, I realized I'd heard it before. Daniel's brow creased. Heard it where? Clara took a breath. From my mother. She used to tell me stories about her best friend, Anna Harper. Your late wife. Daniel's eyes widened. You knew Anna? Clara nodded, tears glimmering. She helped my mother through the hardest part of her life. When Anna passed, we lost touch with this place. When I saw Emily, I didn't plan to come here to stir memories. But something told me to reach out. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Memories flooding back. Anna's laughter, her kindness. How she always spoke about helping people heal. Maybe somehow she had sent Clara here for that very reason. After a long silence, Daniel whispered, Maybe that's why you came into our lives. Maybe Anna knew we both needed someone to remind us how to feel again. Clara smiled through her tears. Maybe, or maybe life just knows when two broken hearts need the same kind of fixing. Emily came running up, holding 2 paper hearts she'd cut out in class. Miss Bennett, Daddy? Look, I made one for each of you. She handed them both the tiny hearts and grinned. You two look happy. Daniel looked at Clara, then back at Emily. Yes, sweetheart, he said quietly. We are. As the sun slipped behind the trees, the 3 of them stood together. A lonely rancher, a gentle teacher, and the little girl who unknowingly brought them together. When Clara finally said goodbye that evening, Daniel walked her to her car. The air was cool now, filled with the hum of crickets and something unspoken between them. Thank you, Daniel said softly. For today. For everything. She smiled. Thank you for saying yes. He looked at her one last time before she drove away, realizing something he hadn't in years.